Welcome to the Dug in a Pub podcast, where I share thoughts, stories, and conversations about my life and my journey post-suicide attempt.
I'd like to begin with a fact.
So pull up a stool and let's see if we can change the world.
I'd like to begin with a fact.
Hello and welcome to episode 5 of the Dug in a Pub podcast. Today's episode, I'm going to talk about fear and love and how those have affected me as I've gone through life, and some stories about fear and love. So thanks for listening, and hope you enjoy the show. So the word fear, or fear itself, boy, that sounds funny. So fear is a great motivator. It's a great demotivator. Present in everyday life. It's present for most people in all sorts of different ways and different aspects. For me, when my marriage ended and my ex-wife told me the marriage was over, fear is what drove me to the suicide attempt. And for me, it was the fear of being alone. I really didn't have a lot of friends, and I didn't know how I fit into the world anymore. I had defined myself so much by the marriage and that relationship that when that was gone, there was nothing. So all I had was fear at that time. And, fear led me down into depression and then led me to the suicide attempt. But since then, I've really worked on fear and fear's place in my life and, made a lot of changes. And again, I do a lot of things with word choice. So when I think about fear, I break that down into what am I afraid of? If I feel fear in a situation, I try to analyze that. I'm afraid of this happening, or I'm afraid I'll be rejected. I'm afraid I'll be laughed at. I'm afraid I'll fail. Whatever it is, I try to break that fear down into, if I can, I try to break the fear down into manageable components. If there's a task in front of me, I try to break that task down into smaller and smaller things. So instead of a big scary thing, it's a bunch of smaller things that might have less fear attached to them. And that's really helped me deal with stress and anger and a lot of things. It's kind of my general approach to life, actually, is when you have a thing, you break that thing into smaller constituent parts, and that helps eliminate, at least in my case, eliminates fear and stress, anxiety. And as I've worked on fear, I've really, without even intending to, I've noticed my fear of heights has diminished quite a bit. I'm not afraid of doing much anymore. Every once in a while, the social anxiety will flare up when we're out. I tend to wear kilts and fezzes and blinky LED shoes and definitely dress not the norm. And I embrace that pretty readily. But there are times when fear of being rejected in public by dressing that way or acting that way, really does overwhelm me. And I don't go out dressed the way I want to be. But, so obviously I'm still working on the fear. But, fear is so much based on the ego. And the ego always wants to win. The ego always wants things to be for it. It wants to be front and center. And ego and fear are so tightly ingrained. So a lot of times when I feel that fear, the other thing I think of is this is the ego wanting to make itself known. And the more I work on making my ego go away and making my ego as small as possible, the less fear I feel in general. For me, I've said that the ego is the root of all evil. And the ego is really where the basis of fear comes from. And it's amazing the changes that have happened as I've learned to step away from ego, to really analyze what I'm afraid of and what the fear is. And like I'm not afraid of being alone anymore. I completely accept myself for who I am and the fact that I might have times in the future where I'm lonely or alone. But that's okay, because I like myself for the first time in, probably 40 years. That fear of being alone for me has gone away. But yeah, fear is just that. How am I going to put this into a coherent episode? When I've changed jobs in the past, there's a tremendous amount of fear there, because what if I don't like the new job? What if my new boss is an asshole? What if, what if? And, a lot of that I've learned to put away, that fear I've learned to put away, because I've, there's a saying, everything happens for a reason. I just think everything happens. So if I make the decision, I was going to make that decision anyhow, and all I can do is take stock of where I am and figure out where I want to go, and then take the steps necessary to get from point A to point B. And again, if that's too big, you make it 8.1 or 8.01, and you make smaller steps. Again, that's done to eliminate fear or minimize fear. The unknown is just a terrifying thing. I know we're embarking on some scary things now with Brett's mom and trying to get a handle on that. And if you look at the whole picture, it's really scary. It's very scary. But we're trying to break it down into what can I do today to minimize that fear or to minimize anxiety. If the problem is 100 steps, try to think about the next 1 or 2 steps instead of the next 100 to get a handle on what you can do right now in the present moment to get past the fear. Because the fear, the giant fear is scary. Starting a new job, or I want to get a new job. That's scary, because now I got to look for a job and how much you're going to make and insurance and all that stuff. But when you start to break that down to the smaller things about why you want a new job, I need better pay, I need better health insurance, I need to be home more often. I used to make a lot of lists, pros and cons lists for any situation. If I was afraid of a situation, I would write down, here's what I'm afraid of. Right? So on the left side of the list, there's all the different things I'm afraid of in that situation. And on the right-hand side, I would kind of expand each one of those into, is there anything I can do about that or not? And if there is, make the list of things I can do for that part, and then make sure I've done all those things. And once I've done all the things, then I let that go. If I can't influence it anymore, I've learned to take the fear of that part or that process or whatever it is and let it go. It's work. It's diligence, and it's something I work on every new situation and every time something comes up. But yeah, you break that down into its little parts, and you learn to, have I done everything I can to handle the situation? And once you cross everything off, to learn to let go of that, to learn to let go of the fear and the anxiety. Again, it's work, but you can get there. So that's my rambling about fear. So thanks for listening. Love is a word everybody knows. And, society tells us that love is what everybody needs. And all you need is love. And love lifts us up where we belong. Love, boy, that's something that's really been a struggle for me. And it took me a while to understand it and to really embrace what it is. When I was married to my ex, I used to say I love you to her, and she would say, no, you don't. And I would always protest. And when the marriage was over, and I started to go back into myself and re-examine myself and how I interacted with the world and what things meant, and started to think about words, and I thought about the word love. And it was, I don't know, maybe 6 or 8 months after the marriage had ended, and I was living in the basement of my own house, and spending a lot of time thinking about things. And I was thinking about the fact she said I never loved her. And I realized that she was right. I didn't really understand what love was when we met. It's probably more of an infatuation or just an attachment than anything else. I thought I needed her, so that was what was need. I thought was love, and it was very unhealthy. And I started dating somebody briefly for about 6 weeks, 4 weeks, and go on like 2 dates. I'm like, oh my God, this is it. Finally, the loneliness is over, which is ridiculous because, the marriage hasn't been over long. I don't even think we were legally separated at that point, but, we were dating for a while, and I knew it was wrong. I knew I wasn't ready. I knew, I was nowhere near being ready to date or understanding relationships yet. So, that ended, which was good. We're still good friends, though. Love her to death. Now that I understand the meaning of that word, and I've had some distance and time to understand that word. But as I've, gone through all this, the first time I said I love you to a woman that had nothing to do with a relationship other than friendship, it seems to me that, at least in American culture, you only say I love you to a woman if she's your mother, your daughter, or the woman you're married to or going to marry, or you're dating. There's no middle ground. It seems like we can't say I love you to friends. And I do now. I say I love you to a tremendous number of people. People that I never would have said it to in the past, because I was under the belief I couldn't say I love you to a guy friend. Because if I said that to him, that must mean I want a relationship. Or if I said it to a female friend, that meant I wanted something more than just friendship. And the first time I said I love you to a woman was just, like said it and I flinched and I looked around and I'm waiting for the sky to fall down on me. I'm like, oh, no, actually I felt really good. Oh, that was wonderful. It was great to say that, to mean it, to understand the weight of me saying that. I've actually held hands with some friends of mine who I wasn't in a relationship with because it was what the situation called for. It was that physical contact, that interconnection, that hey, I'm really, really here, and it didn't mean anything. We're so hung up on what it means if you hold someone's hand or you give someone a hug or you tell someone I love you, that it's got this baggage with it that's just ridiculous. And another thing I learned was I can say I love you to somebody and it is entirely irrelevant if they say I love you back. Now, I'm not saying that in a stalkery way, want to make sure that's clear. But yeah, we need to be able to say I love you to the people we love and understand that if they don't say it back, that doesn't mean anything bad. It doesn't mean that they don't have, that there isn't a connection there. There isn't, I have a family member, I won't say who, but I think I've only heard it from them to me once or twice. And, those times have been remarkable for me because it's been awesome to hear it. But I don't put any weight on the fact I don't hear it more than that. I don't worry about the fact I don't. It doesn't detract from my feelings for them. It just puts it in its place, and I understand that that's where their comfort level is. For a lot of people, it's a lot of my male friends I'll say I love you, and they say, yeah, I love you, bud, I love you, man, I love you, bro. They always show that little, I guess it's a qualifier. They always put that little thing at the end of it to make sure that it's not misunderstood or misinterpreted. Because, romantic comedies and sitcoms have all done a disservice to us with the word or the phrase I love you. And to say that in a completely earnest way and really mean it when I think the first person I said it to is my buddy Doug way back in junior high. And, he said it back to me too. And, yeah, he was the first guy I said it to. And now I've said it to quite a few. And it's so, it feels good to be able to say I love you to people you love without worrying about what they're going to think or what society going to think, or are they going to think I want to be with them or a relationship. And conversely, if someone tells you they love you, that doesn't mean they want a relationship with you. I've talked to a lot of my male friends about that. When they were divorced and getting into the dating world, a girl would talk to them and they would immediately latch onto that. Like, oh, she must like me. She must want to date me and have my babies and grow old with me. And it's like, no, she thinks you're nice and friendly. And that doesn't have to be any more than that ever. We got to stop putting, the extra baggage on that. I mean, okay, I almost went off on a tangent, but I won't. When I was talking about fear, when I started dating again, after my marriage ended, I was dating a couple different people and some of that was self-validation. For the longest time in my marriage, I thought I didn't have value. I didn't think I was a good person, a good man, a good husband. And some of those were sketchy at the time. I didn't, I was in my 30s, but I was still in full-blown Asperger's and ungodly passive-aggressive. So I had my issues, but, as I was trying to figure out who I was again and coming to grips with moving on and moving forward and trying to find love again, I remember I said it to Brett, my current partner. I think we'd been together maybe 5 or 6 weeks, and I told her I loved her, and it was awesome. It felt great, because I did, absolutely. And it felt right, and it felt good to say it. I wasn't worried about not hearing it back, which is the important thing. And when you tell someone you love you, you can't tie an expectation of hearing it back to it. You need to just say it and let it go, and if it comes back, great. If it doesn't, it goes along with never ask a question if you're not ready for any answer you might get. Like when I asked Brett to marry me, I did it on a blog post, actually, on the anniversary of the day we quote-unquote friended on Facebook, and I was completely prepared for her to say no. I had to be. If I'm not prepared for her to say no, I shouldn't ask the question. All my enjoyment in life and everywhere I've gone to now, every place I've grown, has been on the other side of fear. And, they say life begins outside your comfort zone. I completely and utterly believe that. And, inside your comfort zone, there's little fear. There's hardly any fear at all. Outside your comfort zone, that's loaded with fear. Some could be huge things like, I'm going to go skydiving, which seems absolutely terrifying to me, and I never will do it. Not a fear I need to conquer. But there are smaller things, like after my marriage ended, I actually auditioned for a play, and that's something I'd always wanted to do. It had always been tremendously terrifying for me to do. So I went and I I auditioned for a play in Waukesha. Didn't get the part, which I'm actually pretty happy about, but I did it. I got up the courage and I went and I filled out all the paperwork and I auditioned, and it was great. It was so liberating to look at the fear and deconstruct that fear into all the different things I'm afraid of, and then realize that all those things I was afraid of were things I pretty much do anyhow. When I go out in public, I'm often in a fez and a kilt, or just a fez or just a kilt, and shirts and shoes too. But when I go out, people always notice me. I don't dress in a way that is too blend in, and there was a great deal of fear overcoming that. And part of the reasons I did that was to force myself to let that fear go, to go past that fear to the other side, and find the love of the people I've met, and the life I live now, and the enjoyment in standing out and not hiding and not pretending to be something I'm not, because I like being out there. One of the things Brett and I talk about is, in the animal kingdom, or a lot of it, the male is always dressed colorfully, and the peacock. And so Brett calls me her peacock. And that's, I've kind of taken that to heart. So when I go out, I'm normally wearing some funky shirt and a fez and a kilt and blinky shoes. And, we just go have fun. And that fear, I've learned to just make that sucker small. And now I use fear strictly as a motivation for the most part. I mean, there are times when I get stuck behind it and I can't get past it. And I go out and I'm just plain old Doug instead of, Fez Doug. So yeah, those are the two things I wanted to talk about this week, was fear and love. There's a lot of overlap between them. For me, I found love on the other side of fear. I actually wrote a poem about it, but I don't think I'll share that because, but I did write it recently. But yeah, so that's love and fear, and you can learn to overcome fear. You can learn to love your fear and understand it for what it is, and learn how to use it to your advantage, which is what I think I've done. And then the love aspect, yeah, it's funny. I used to think that, in my past, I used to think that you can only love one person. You can love your spouse, you can love your parents, you can love your kids. What I've learned is the more people I love, the more love I share with everybody and just the universe, the more love I have. It's a very wonderful and amazing, completely renewable and seemingly unlimited resource. The more of it I just give out, just to people, just everywhere, the more I have, and it's awesome and it's wonderful. And there's a lot of fear in giving that love out, because again, we're so taught to don't love somebody unless they're going to love you back. And you need to put that fear away, whether you're going to get it back or not, and just learn to love and not be afraid. So yeah, that's about it for that one. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Dug in a Pub podcast. Sorry if I rambled a bit. They're just kind of big topics, and I've just been feeling a little out of sorts trying to get my head around these topics. But thanks, and share the love, and let go of the fear. So I've got an interview with Eliza Rickman coming up. You should check her out on YouTube. I will share some videos of hers soon. It's going to be a two-parter. The first one, we talk about music and the industry and her. And the second part of that interview will be a second episode where we talk more about life and fear and anxieties and things that she's encountered and experienced in her life. And then I've got a couple more interviews coming up, a couple more topics coming up. But yeah, that's it for this episode. Thanks for listening. Tell all your friends to take a listen. Send me questions, ask me questions. If you want to be a guest, shoot me an email and let me know. You can find me on Dug in a Pub, and I'm Dug in a Pub just about everywhere. Thanks a lot. Have a good one. Bye-bye.